I'm hoping that if you are intimidated by crocheting a pumpkin, you will find this tutorial super easy. Hey, today I am going to show you how to crochet a pumpkin. This is the Country Bumpkin Pumpkin. It is a free crochet pattern on my blog. The design is a few years old, and making a step-by-step crochet tutorial has been on my list. So I am super excited to share this tutorial with you. I remember as a newer crocheter, a crochet pumpkin was something that really intimidated me. I'm hoping that if you are intimidated by crocheting a pumpkin, you will find this tutorial super easy and you will be able to whip up a pumpkin in no time. This is the medium-sized pumpkin, and this is the one that I will be showing you how to make in the tutorial. But I will actually be making the mini version of this, so the tutorial won't be too long. Here is the mini Country Bumpkin pumpkin. I may have a small obsession with making these, so here are some more Country Bumpkin pumpkins. Crochet pumpkins are so much fun, and the pattern is really customizable. You can make the pumpkin slightly bigger by going up a hook size, or if you like tighter stitches, you could go down a hook size. Just remember that any changes you make to the pattern will result in it looking a little differently, but I think that's fun too. I will post a link below to the free crochet pattern on my blog, so if you wanted to look at the materials list and all of the things before jumping in, you can do that. I will also share with you real quick what you need: some worsted weight yarn, a size I or 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. If you're a gauge swatcher, there is a gauge for the pattern, so just head over to my blog to get that. It's a pumpkin, so gauge really isn't that important. But I put it in the pattern because I know so many of us have different tensions, and I wanted you to have that option. I also recommend a measuring tape. I do put measurements in the pattern. A tapestry needle. I prefer the clover bent tip tapestry needle. It is a game changer for making pumpkins. I will also link that below. Scissors and some polyfill. And if you have trouble finding the first stitch or the last stitch in your row, I highly recommend some stitch markers for marking them. If you take a glance at the pattern and you see any stitches or techniques that are new to you, don't worry, I am going to walk you step by step on how to make this. Let's dive in so you can make a Country Bumpkin pumpkin. To start out, you're going to want to leave a generous yarn tail. I suggest about 8 inches or so. Make a slip knot. Now you're going to foundation half double crochet 26 stitches. If the foundation half double crochet is new for you, don't worry, I'm going to show you how to work it. Chain 2. Now yarn over and go into the first chain that you made. I go in right here, and then I also pick up this loop right here in the back. You don't have to do that, and sometimes it's a little hard to grab, but I think it looks cleaner. I mean, we're making a pumpkin, so it's not that big of a deal, but it's just kind of a habit. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through those 2 loops there. Be sure that you're pushing your hook through those loops because we really want to control our tension here. We don't want it too tight. So now you have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through the first loop. That creates your foundation chain. 3 loops on your hook again. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And that's our first foundation half double crochet. You're going to want to make 26 of these. So now you can slightly turn your work like this. Look for the V right here. That's what we're going to work into. So yarn over, go through both of those loops, yarn over, pull through, pulling up a loop, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the first loop, creating your foundation chain, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and that's your half double crochet for your first row of the pattern. Again, turn your work, see the V? That's where we're working into. Again, yarn over, go through both loops, pull up a loop, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the first loop only, creating your foundation chain, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, and that's your half double crochet for your first row of the pattern. There we have it. We have 3 foundation half double crochet stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up. Feel free to pause the video and rewatch that if you need to. You're going to need 26 of these. You're going to want to pay very close attention to your tension. So be sure that you're pushing your hook all the way through those loops. I'm going to speed up the video, so feel free to pause it until you make your 26 stitches, and I will meet you at the end of this row. All right, you should have 26 foundation half double crochet stitches. Now we'll move on to the next row. Chain 1, turn your work. Now you're going to work a half double crochet in the very first stitch. Right there. There's your first stitch. So you're going to work a half double crochet going through both of those loops. Now for the rest of this row until the last stitch, you're going to half double crochet in the front loop only. So here are your loops. This one right here, the one closest to you is the front loop, and there's the back loop. So we're going to half double crochet in the front loop only. So yarn over and just picking up that front loop there, just like that. Pull up a loop and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So you're going to do that for every stitch in the row until you get to the last stitch. Be sure to just pick up that front loop only right there. So go ahead and work those half double crochet stitches, and I will meet you back at the last stitch in this row. All right, I just have one more stitch left to work right there. Sometimes this one can be hard to find, and this is why I recommend using stitch markers that I forgot to use, but I'll use those for the next row. So right here is the last stitch in the row. We're going to half double crochet through both of those loops. So just be sure to pick up both loops. And there we are. Now you will chain 1, turn your work, and see the texture we get when we just work in that front loop only. It leaves the back loop unworked, so you have this nice little pop of texture here. And the reason why I work through both loops for the first stitch and the last stitch is because you get a nice clean edge here. If you're having trouble finding your first and last stitch in the row, just mark them with a stitch marker. So after I work this stitch, I will mark it with a stitch marker. For the next row, you're going to single crochet in that first stitch. Go ahead and mark it with a stitch marker if you need to. Now we're going to work a cross stitch single crochet. That's a mouthful. The cross stitch single crochet is a slight variation of a normal single crochet. So I'm going to show you how to work that. You're going to go into the next stitch, make sure you go through both loops, and you're going to yarn under. That means your yarn is going to be under your hook. So just grab that yarn and pull through, pulling up a loop, and then yarn over and go through both loops. Let me show you that again. You're going to go into the next stitch, yarn under. Your yarn is going to be under your hook. Pull it through, and then yarn over and pull through both loops. Let me show you that again. Go into the next stitch, yarn under, pull up a loop, and you want to make sure you're pulling up that loop to the normal single crochet height. This is a little bit tighter of a stitch, so it can very easily cause tension issues. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. And see how it just gives a slight cross look there, almost like an X versus your normal single crochet. Keep working those cross stitch single crochets until you have one stitch left in this row, and I will meet you at that point. For the last stitch in this row that we have marked here, you're going to work a regular single crochet. Remove your stitch marker. Now chain one, turn your work, and we're going to repeat row one. So you're going to half double crochet in the first stitch, going through both loops. Then you're going to half double crochet in the front loop only of the next stitch, and you're going to repeat that until you have one stitch left in this row. And just like row one, we'll work a normal half double crochet stitch going through both of the loops for the very last stitch in this row. So keep working those half double crochets in the front loop only, and I will meet you at the last stitch. I am at the last stitch in this row that I have marked here with a stitch marker, and we'll work a normal half double crochet going through both of those loops here. I clearly cannot remember to use these stitch markers, so I'm not going to use them throughout the pattern. But if that helps you, it's a great way to make sure you're not adding or dropping stitches. Now we are going to go to row 4 of the pattern. You're going to chain 2, turn your work. We'll work a double crochet in that first stitch there, right there. To work a double crochet, for the next stitch, you're going to work a puff stitch. To work a puff stitch, you're going to yarn over, go into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and I like to just puff it up a little bit. Now you'll yarn over, go into the loop again, and repeat that, and just puff it up. You're going to repeat that 2 more times. So yarn over, go into that same stitch, pull up a loop, puff it up, 1 more time. So you should have 9 loops on your hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They can kind of get shoved in there. Now you will yarn over and pull through all 9 of those loops. Then chain 1, and that is a puff stitch. By puffing up those stitches when you pull up the loops, it really makes it easy to pull that last loop through all of those stitches. So let me show you how to do that again. So you're going to skip the next stitch because we just made 2 stitches with that puff stitch. Here's where we pulled yarn through all of those loops, and that created the first stitch, and then we chained 1 to create the second stitch. Skipping the next stitch, you're going to yarn over and go into the next one, pull up a loop. Don't forget to puff it up, yarn over, go into the same stitch, pull up a loop, puff it up. Do that 2 more times. 1 and 2. Now you'll yarn over, and it helps if you kind of angle your hook down just a little, and I just pull through those loops. If you feel like you're getting hung up, just give it a little wiggle there. There you go. And then chain 1. So that's a puff stitch. Skip the next stitch, puff stitch in the next stitch. I'll do this one a little faster. There's 2, 3, and 4. And now yarn over and pull through all 9 of those loops. And then chain 1. You don't have to do that many. You could even do 3 yarn overs and have 7 loops, but I really like the big puff stitches. And you're forming the stitch on the front side of your work. So this is the front of the stitch. So skip the next stitch and puff stitch in the next. And you're going to repeat this until the last stitch in the row. You're going to place a double crochet in that very last stitch. So go ahead and work those puff stitches, and I will meet you at the end of this row. All right, I just worked my last puff stitch. So I'm going to skip the next stitch. I'm skipping that stitch, and here's the last stitch in the row. I'm going to double crochet in that last stitch. And that is your puff stitch row. Now we're going to repeat row 1. So chain 1, turn your work, half double crochet in that first stitch, half double crochet in the front loop only in the next stitch. You're going to continue to work a half double crochet in the front loops only until the last stitch in this row, and we're going to work a half double crochet through both of those loops in the last stitch. If you have trouble finding the loop, just slightly turn your work towards you and look for the V. There you go. So right there's the front loop. So keep working those, and I will meet you at the last stitch in this row. All right, I have 1 stitch left. This one can be a little tricky, so just turn your work a little here. And there's our V right there. So half double crochet through both of those loops. Now we're going to repeat row 4, which is a puff stitch row. So chain 2, turn your work, and this is what we have so far. Double crochet in the very first stitch, and puff stitch in the next. So yarn over, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop and puff it up. Repeat that 3 more times. 1, 2, and 3. Now yarn over and go through all 9 loops and chain 1. And there's your puff stitch. Skip the next stitch, puff stitch in the next. And you're just going to keep placing those puff stitches in every other stitch until you have 2 stitches left in this row. Then you will skip a stitch and double crochet in the very last stitch. So go ahead and finish up this row here, and I will meet you at the end. I just worked my very last puff stitch. So I have 2 stitches left in the row. Skip the next stitch and double crochet in that last stitch there. Make sure you go through both loops. And that is the end of row 6. Now we're going to repeat row 1. So chain 1, turn your work. For row 7, we're going to repeat row 1. So half double crochet in the first stitch, half double crochet in the front loop of the next stitch, and continue working half double crochets in those front loops until the last stitch in this row. So go ahead and work those stitches, and be sure to work a half double crochet in both loops of the very last stitch in this row. And I will meet you at that point. All right, that is the end of row 7. Row 8 is a repeat of row 2. So you will chain 1, turn your work, and you're going to single crochet in that first stitch. And cross stitch single crochet in the next stitch. So go into both loops, yarn under, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through both loops. And you're going to cross stitch single crochet in each stitch in this row until the very last stitch. Just remember to yarn under for that very first loop. And try to make sure your tension is pretty loose here. All right, 2 stitches left in the row. So cross stitch single crochet and then single crochet in the last stitch. Now we'll move on to row 9, which is a repeat of row 1. So chain 1, turn your work, half double crochet, and then half double crochet in the front loop only. And I'm sure y'all have this row down by now, but I will just keep working it so I can show you the repeat rows for the pattern. So just keep working those half double crochet stitches in the front loop only. And I will meet you at the very last stitch in this row. All right, there's 1 stitch left in this row. You can see it there. And I'm going to go through both of those loops for this half double crochet. And that is the end of row 9. Now we'll move on to row 10, chain 1, and turn. This is a repeat row of row 2. So single crochet in the first stitch, cross stitch single crochet in the next. Again, you're going to yarn under and then yarn over and pull through both loops. So go into the stitch, yarn under, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both. Keep working those cross stitch single crochets until the last stitch in this row, and you will work a regular single crochet in the last stitch. All right, here I am at the last stitch in this row, right there. I'm going to single crochet. So that is the end of row 10. Moving on to row 11, and this is a repeat row of row 1. So chain 1 and turn, half double crochet, and half double crochet in the front loops only. I'm sure you have it by now, so go ahead and rock those half double crochets in the front loop only, and I will meet you at the last stitch in this row. All right, there's one stitch left and half double crochet through both of those loops. And that is the end of row 11. So moving on to row 12, this is another repeat row. I know this is redundant, but I really wanted to work all of the repeat rows for you. So you will chain 2, turn your work, double crochet in that first stitch, and puff stitch in the next. Don't forget to puff them up there. Ooh, look at those speckles. This is why I love speckled yarn. Last one here. Yarn over, go through all of those loops, and chain 1. Skip the next stitch, puff stitch in the next, puff it up. So keep repeating those puff stitches until you have 2 stitches left in your row. All right, there are 2 stitches left in this row. Skip the next stitch and double crochet in that very last stitch. Moving on to row 13, chain 1. And this is another row 1 repeat. So half double crochet in the first stitch and half double crochet in the front loop of the next stitch. And keep working this row, and I will meet you back at the end. All right, that is the end of row 13. Now we're going to move on to row 14. Row 14 is a repeat of row 4, so chain 2, turn your work, double crochet in that first stitch, and wait for it, puff stitch in the next stitch. So just keep working this row 4 repeat here, and I will meet you at the end of this row. All right, that is the end of row 14. Now, in order to continue the pattern, you're going to keep repeating rows 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 in that order until you reach about 13 inches, and this took me a total of 30 rows. Now in this pattern, we don't count that foundation half double crochet. We don't count that in our row count. This right here is row 1. Just keep repeating rows 7 through 14 in order until you have 30 rows or 13 inches. You want to make sure that you end on a row 14 repeat. That means you have a puff stitch row, and then you have a half double crochet row and another puff stitch row, because once you reach that point, we're going to work 3 more rows. That way the end of our pumpkin matches the beginning of our pumpkin. We have 1, 2, 3 rows and then a puff stitch row. And the reason why is because we want to match the pattern. We have all these rows in between the puff stitch rows. So when we work 3 more rows here, and we're going to attach this end to this end. So we'll have about the same amount of rows between the puff stitches. And I will show you all that next. Go ahead and repeat those rows until you get to row 30, then move on to row 31. And I will go ahead and show you how to work those rows now since I'm working the mini version. Row 31 is a repeat row of row 1. So chain 1, turn your work, half double crochet in that first stitch, half double crochet in the front loops of the next stitch, and continue working half double crochets in those front loops until you get to the last stitch in this row. All right, I'm on the last stitch, so go ahead and work a half double crochet through both of those loops. That's the end of row 31, and we are moving on to row 32, which is a repeat row 2. So chain 1, turn your work, single crochet in that first stitch, cross stitch single crochet in the next, yarn under, and cross stitch single crochet in the rest of the stitches in this row until you get to the very last stitch, and we will work a regular single crochet in the very last stitch. Then we will only have 1 more row left before we start shaping our pumpkins. Last stitch and regular single crochet. All right, that is the end of row 32. Row 33, the last row for this pumpkin, is a repeat of row 1. So chain 1, half double crochet, half double crochet in the front loops, and go ahead and half double crochet in the front loops of all those stitches until the very last stitch. Then you will work a half double crochet through both of those loops in the last stitch. Do not fasten off yet. We still have another thing we're going to do, so just bear with me. Go ahead and finish row 33, and I will meet you for the next step. All right, that is the last row of the pattern, and we have the wrong side facing us. I know it can be kind of tough to recognize puff stitches, the right side versus the wrong side. See how it's kind of flat looking here? This is the wrong side of the puff stitch. If you flip your work over, you can kind of see the difference. So this is the front side of the puff stitch, but it can be easier to just look at the other rows in the pattern to identify your right side versus your wrong side. See how we have the line here where we just worked in the front loop? We have this back loop exposed. And then you can also see your cross stitch single crochets here. So it may be easier to look at that. So this is the front side of our work. And this is the wrong side of our work. So with the wrong side facing out, we are going to fold our work in half. Take the beginning of your work and just fold it like this to meet the end of your work. Just like this. Now turn your work. We have our loop on the right hand side. Grab your hook and you're going to want to go into the first stitch here of your foundation row. Just like that. Now grab this loop back here. I kind of have mine stretched out so I didn't drop a stitch here. Let's just clean all that up here. Just grab the yarn tail and kind of pull here. Kind of give that a little tug. Straighten all that up. Part of the reason I do this is because I want to make sure my working yarn is on the front of my hook. And see, when I pull it, the yarn that moves is on the back of my hook. So I want to switch that around here. Give it another little tug there. Now we have it going on here. And now you're going to grab this loop right here and you're just going to pull it through both of these loops. We're going to connect the last row of our work with the beginning of our work. So just grab that loop and bloop. There we go. Now you're going to go into the next stitch here and the next stitch in your last row. Now this can be a little tricky. We've already worked that stitch. See, we got the yarn coming out of there. So this is our next stitch here. So go through both loops there, grab your yarn and pull through those two loops and those two loops. And then slip into that one. So we are just going to slip stitch our beginning chain to the last row of our work. So go into the next stitch and go into the next stitch in that row and just grab that yarn and pull through. There you go. You're slip stitching. And just keep repeating that until you've worked all of these stitches. It does help to go ahead and line them up, but to give you a visual, I really wanted to kind of have it all apart. So go ahead and line those stitches up, and that way you can just work from one row and pop right into the next row. And then loop them through here. And sometimes you just have to keep readjusting there. So I have those lined up, that row, and there you go. Just keep working those, slip stitching those rows together. I have 3 left here. There towards the end, it can be a little tricky to see them, so just keep lining it up. All right, here we're at the end here. Sometimes they can get a little twisted, so just look for your V's. See, we got a V right here, so just pop your hook in there. Oops, just pop your hook in there, then go to the next row here. I'm just going to drop that so you can see, and find your V there and go through those 2 loops there, and then slip stitch. It should look something like this, where you've slip stitched those 2 rows together. So make sure you didn't miss any loops here. I just kind of give it a little tug. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. And once you've double checked that you haven't skipped any stitches, go ahead and fasten off. So yarn over and pull the yarn through that loop. And I would leave a very generous tail. In the pattern, I say about 36 inches. And depending on how you want to shape your pumpkin, you're going to need a long tail. So go ahead and pull that yarn tail through, and you may even want to measure it. And then go ahead and cut that yarn tail. Give it a little tug. All right. So you should have the wrong side still facing you. And now we're going to just turn it right side out. So just turn it right side out there. Go ahead and get your yarn tails fixed here. Your beginning tail is going to be a lot shorter than the tail we fastened off with. Now grab a darning needle. These clover bent tip darning needles are the best for shaping pumpkins or for any amigurumi. Grab the yarn tail that we just fastened off with, the really long one, and go ahead and thread your needle. Now we are going to close the bottom of our pumpkin. And this is what I do. You don't have to really be very specific with this. I just like to go in like every 3 or 4 loops. So I start out just kind of picking up. You can go through both loops if you want. Really, you don't have to be very picky with this. We just want to make sure we're closing it up. So there's the first loop. I go ahead and pull the yarn tail all the way through that. And now I skip a couple loops, pick up another loop here, go back in, and I'm going to kind of show you a fast way to do this. Skip a couple loops, pick up another loop here, and we're going to go out, kind of bring that through, skip a couple loops, go back in that loop there, skip a couple loops, go back out. See what I'm doing here? Skip a couple loops, go back in, and I do that a few times, and then I pull my yarn tail through. It just kind of saves you some time there. And I don't pull it too tight because we don't want to close that yet. We still want some room to maneuver here. So skip a couple loops, go out, skip a couple, go in, and just keep repeating that. Going in, out, go in. I just kind of push the fabric on there, skip a couple, go out, skip a couple, go in, and now we are back where we started. So skip a few and go out. Now pull that yarn tail through. And just gently tug it. There we go. Okay. I kind of just stick my finger in there to make sure there's still a little bit of a hole, and then I'll give it another tug to close that on up. And this is the bottom of our pumpkin. I like to kind of go through a few stitches just to make sure that it's not going to open back up on us. You don't have to get too crazy with this because we are going to use this yarn tail to shape the pumpkin, but I just kind of wanted to make sure that that hole was secure there. Now grab your polyfill and we are going to stuff our pumpkin. I grab about a handful and just take a few pieces off at a time and gently just kind of push it in there. So once I get it kind of like that, you can see it's busting out a little bit. I just kind of get my fingers in there and like massage it around and kind of get it all in the middle there. There's really no rhyme or reason to this. I just feel like I can shape it a little bit better. So I just kind of get it all mushed around in there. And then I'll just kind of squeeze my pumpkin to see what it's going to look like, because we will be closing this hole here. So I just kind of squeeze it and just see it still needs a little bit more. This part isn't too important. We can still add more stuffing if we need to, but I like to try to go ahead and just have to stuff it once. I'm gonna grab just a little bit more, and we can always take some out if we have too much too. Now I'm going to close it, or kind of close it. I may have too much, but we're gonna go with it because we can take some out. I know some people don't like being able to see the stuffing, and some people use like pantyhose or something like that to put in here and then put the stuffing in there. I don't go through all of that. I actually am going to take a little bit out. So I have a couple of these needles, so I'm going to leave this one on the long tail that we're going to shape the pumpkin with, and then I'm going to go ahead and start closing up this circle. Now we're not going to close it permanently because we're still going to shape this pumpkin, but I like to go ahead and figure out what I'm going to use for my pumpkin stem. Then I'm actually going to borrow the stick from this one. Have that ready. Go ahead and thread this shorter yarn tail on your needle. And we're going to use the same method we did for the bottom as the top. Just go every couple of stitches and just go in and out. So just keep going every few stitches and weaving that yarn tail in and out, and then pull it through. Okay, so now I kind of get my pumpkin kind of sort of how I want it to be. So I have it a little shaped here. Now take whatever you're using for a stem, and I go ahead and kind of close it up, but I'm not going to anchor it. This is just giving me a reference, okay? So now take your stem out. I'm going to go ahead and take this off for now just because it's going to get in my way. Now we're going to switch back to our long tail. So go ahead and thread that yarn on that needle. I like to start with the sides that don't have the puff stitches. And I'm shaping the mini pumpkin, so you're going to have way more to do on your bigger pumpkin. So go ahead and find one of the long sides without the puff stitches. And we're going to take this yarn. I like to try to find the middle point and then just take that yarn tail and wrap it just like that. And I just hold it there with my finger. Now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go down the center of that, or give it a little squeeze, and it'll come out the center of the bottom. And gently tug that through. You may have to adjust this some, but go ahead and gently tug that through there. And then just tug it as tight as you want it. So if you want a squatty pumpkin, you're going to give that a pretty good tug. I'm going to make this one not so squatty. Now find another side that doesn't have the puff stitches. So because this is a mini, there's really only two sides without puff stitches. So flip it around there, and we're going to repeat the same thing. We're going to try to find about the middle, and wrap our yarn tail around there. There we go. And then coming down the middle again, and try to get the middle of the bottom there. I kind of was off a little bit here. It's not that big of a deal, but I try to make sure I'm in the middle. Okay, and then give it a gentle tug, just like that. And then I kind of smush it again just to puff it back up a little. All right, so we have those two sides shaped. And if you wanted to, you could leave it like that. I like to just do a little bit more shaping because it's kind of cute like that. Now I like to go between the puff stitches. So take that same yarn tail and come up between the puff stitches there. And again, you're going to go down in the middle and come out the middle of the bottom and pull that through. Here we go. And give it another tug. And then flip to the other side and repeat that. There we go. For the bigger pumpkins, I do this multiple times. There's going to be more. There were more repeat rounds, so there's going to be more flat sides. I call them flat, but it's where we kind of worked the rows flat and didn't have any puff stitches. And there's going to be more puff stitches to go between. So I just kind of adjust that to be in the middle and give it a tug. You can shape your pumpkin however you want. This is just how I prefer to do mine. So as you can see, that spot opened up a little bit more. So if you're done shaping your pumpkin, just give that a little tug to close it again. Put whatever you're using for your stem back in, just like that. And you can make this go down further if you want to. Just kind of like massage it around in there and get it stuck in the stuffing. There you go. Then pull it as tight as you want it. Thread your needle and just weave that end in. I just like to go around a couple of times just to tighten it. And then you're going to weave this one in as well. So make sure you have your pumpkin how you want it. And I'm pretty satisfied with this one. Make sure you have enough stuffing, or if you need to take some out. I think I like this one how it is. Let me see if I can, not really thrilled about that, but let's just see. I may need to take some out. No, we're good. See, you can just kind of squeeze it and squish it and love it until you get it how you want it. Then go ahead and weave in the ends. You can also get these super cute tags, and you can use these as a stem as well. So I'm going to show you how I add these tags to my pumpkins to use them as stems. So let's just take that out and return it to its original owner there. This is what I do. I go ahead and I fold it how I want it here. And then I thread this with yarn. I just go through both loops there. Thread it with yarn. And I get it kind of down in there. This is almost too big for this little mini pumpkin, but we're going to try to make it work. So I get it down in there where I want it. And again, I'm going to tug this so we don't have a hole there. So kind of get that down in there where you want it, okay? Then over here on the other side, I'm going to pick up one of the loops down in here. Just kind of, just something to go through. It doesn't have to be perfect. Let me see if you can see that. So just see how my needle's coming out right there? So I'm just going to give it a gentle tug. I want to make sure that this isn't like tugged too far and it's leaned to one side. So you just have to kind of keep adjusting it. And now I've only done one, so it's not very secure in there. So I am going to go through this side right here. Just going to go through, come out the other side, and do the same thing. Pick up, one of those stitches there. I don't want to go too far into the pumpkin. I just kind of want to stay right here in the middle. There we go. Okay. Pull the yarn tail through, give it a tug. Okay, we're going to go through one more time just to make sure it's extra secure. So do the same thing. Go through, make sure you're going through both holes. Pick up some yarn there, come through, and there we go. Okay, now I'm going to kind of find the center here. I'm not going through that loop. I'm just finding kind of the center of my pumpkin there. And I'm going to come out, I'm going to go down, and I'm going to come out the bottom here. Because I want this kind of sunk down in my pumpkin because it is a little too big for this pumpkin. But we're going to try to make it work. So pull through, make sure you're not catching on anything up here. Now, I'm going to give it a little tug. See how it's going to kind of pull that down in there a little? There we go. Now, just weave in your ends on the bottom. Nothing fancy. Just go through some of the stitches here. I just do it about 3 times just to make sure nothing's going to come loose. Do the same thing with this one. I'm going to make sure I have my pumpkin how I want it before I cut that off. And I think it's adorable. And that is how you make a country bumpkin pumpkin. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. And if you decide to make some country bumpkin pumpkins, I would love to see them. Feel free to tag me on social media and I will post links below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would absolutely love it if you could give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel and maybe even sharing this with your crochet friends. Until next time, happy crocheting!